Now it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhaled frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, you know, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great.
Yes, not cannabis. Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gangway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical Russ Belville.
Welcome back to Toker Talk Radio. It's time here in I'm at in lovely Normal, Idaho. Sitting on my road. In that parent's house. Well, I think you're still probably talking about that story out of New Mexico I just told you. Unbelievable. And folks, this is just the police state that we live in now, and this is just how far things have gone. And I hope that what we're seeing here are the death throes of prohibition, the last gasps of these bullying dinosaurs, because this better not be the start of something new. This better be the end of it. Being violated 8 times over a 14-hour period, that's tantamount to torture, what they put this guy through. I mean, remember how incensed we were when we saw the photos from Abu Ghraib during the Bush administration? This is in that line. This is on that same level. And I always wonder with these guys, I mean, do they ever really think about the lengths to which they're going for such a small crime? I mean, even if the guy was packing pills or heroin or weed up his ass, how much could he possibly have been packing? I mean, how much of a crime did we actually try to stop here? We're committing far greater crimes trying to stop a very minor crime in their mind. And it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, obviously, I understand, you know, when they had the Nuremberg trials after World War II, and people were asking, how could these Nazi soldiers, these guards in Auschwitz and Dachau and all these places, how could they day by day see the systematic extermination of Jews and gypsies and homosexuals and the mentally ill and the handicapped? How could they see that day after day and not react to it? How could they just obey orders? And that's what they always said, too. We were just obeying orders. And there was that famous experiment, I think it was Stanford, but I may be wrong, but a very famous experiment where they had students administer electric shocks to people that they couldn't see, but they could hear them screaming. And these students, when they were told by an authority figure, would just keep administering higher and higher shocks until the person would presumably die. The capacity for human beings to do terrible and unspeakable things to each other in the name of authority has been demonstrated throughout the centuries. So it's no surprise that when we demonize marijuana users, we demonize drug users to the extent that we do, it's no surprise then that demonization ends up with some cop, with some doctors who think of a drug user as less than human and someone that they have every right to violate, someone who has no rights to complain, no rights to refuse. This is on par with so many of the atrocities and unspeakable actions that have taken place throughout society. And I guess I shouldn't say on par. Obviously, 6 million people died in the Holocaust. I apologize. I don't want to take it that far. But you know what I'm saying? The attitudes behind it, the psychology of it, this ability to mistreat other humans in the name of authority, of an authority figure. That's what I'm referring to. And it's that same kind of sickness that infected Nazi Germany, the same kind of sickness that infected Puritan America, the Inquisition. It's the same. It's this demonization of the other. It's this cultural war against people who are different than us. And this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more as we get into hour 2 as well. I had a great discussion online with one of our longtime listeners, Wayne Reese, about racism in the drug war, and a recent post by Dr. Carl Hart about the marijuana reform movement needing to recognize that this is a civil rights issue. And it's my hope that some good can come out of this New Mexico story, these pair of New Mexico stories, that it will cause mainstream readers finding out about these stories. When they read them, they'll, even if they don't smoke pot or they don't know anyone that smokes pot or does any sort of drugs, will cause them to think, wait a minute, really? Really? This is how far it's come? This is how far it's gone to try to stop it? Is this the kind of country we want to be? I mean, when you hear the story of David Eckert coming out of a Walmart parking lot, rolling through a stop sign and getting out of the car with clenched buttocks, that could be anybody. That could be your dad. That could be your brother. Doesn't have to be anyone involved in drugs whatsoever for this kind of thing to affect them, for this kind of thing to devastate them. I mean, David Eckert and Timothy Young, these two men who were violated, will be dealing with the psychological repercussions of that for the rest of their lives. And we're going to do this over drugs. Hard for me to even properly describe the outrage I feel for this. All I can do is keep trying to fight and stop. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more to talk about here on Toker Talk Radio. Stick around.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
I'm Radical Russ Belville, and I want to thank you for listening to 420 Radio. We couldn't survive without you and our sponsors, and I'd like you to check out one of our prime sponsors, the National Cannabis Coalition. I've been working with NCC since June of 2012, and I'm proud to be part of the team they have assembled. National Cannabis Coalition is building the partnerships with reformers, lawmakers, and industry we need to be successful. Visit the National Cannabis Coalition website at nationalcannabiscoalition.com or the easier-to-remember ncc420.com. That's where you'll get the exclusive first look at my radical rants, as well as informative articles from the nation's top cannabis pundits. Visit ncc420.com today, and if you have your phone handy, text Russ to 420-420 to support NCC and 420 Radio. It's a free text message that helps us help you end adult marijuana prohibition. Learn more at ncc420.com, and thanks for supporting independent marijuana legalization public radio. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, I respectfully invoke all my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney, Omar Figueroa. Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
Prohibition Stories. As a public service, the Russ Belville Show reminds you that smoking marijuana does not make one stupid. However, some stupid people do smoke marijuana, and Prohibition is always waiting for another victim. Learn your lesson from today's Stupid Prohibition Stories.
With your stupid Prohibition stories, I'm old-timey 1920s radio reporter Freddie Farrak. This just in from the New York Post. Gets hit on pretty cop who busted him for pot. Subway vigilante Bernard Getz has been lamely hitting on the young undercover narcotics cop who busted him on a pot sale charge Friday night, the Post has learned. The female undercover had no idea, until he was in custody, who the creepy old man was who chatted her up in Union Square Park, invited her up to his apartment to get high, and then allegedly sold her $30 in pot, a source familiar with the investigation said. The source said of Bernhard Getz, quote, "It sounds like he was definitely trying to pick her up. But what a pickup line. Give me $30. Getz became a part of New York City lore in 1984 when he shot 4 black youths who he said were threatening him on the downtown 2 train. Getz, age 65, was busted a short time after leaving his apartment with the cute undercover who was 40 years his junior. I'm Freddie Farrak with your stupid Prohibition Stories. Old Bernie Getz getting in trouble, huh? I remember I was in high school when that Bernie Getz Subway vigilante story went down. Wow. Well, thank you, Freddie Farrak. Appreciate it while we're out here on the remote here in Idaho. And while I'm on the remote, I have to find a way to kill that music. Give me just a second, folks. There we go. All right, so just got a few minutes here before we head to the break, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the state of Oregon before we head to break here, because we have got, some amazing changes that we're going through. And the first of which is that we had the state legislative council come down today and say basically that cities can't ban dispensaries. And it's fantastic news, especially when we're talking about all the other states around that have been able to ban them. California comes to mind. There's a ban on 180 cities in California now. And 4 cities in Oregon were trying to make the ban, but the state legislative council says they can't do it. We just recently passed a dispensary law, HB 3460, and it gives the state, not the localities, the power to regulate marijuana dispensaries. Plus, we have a GMO bill that says any agricultural seed can only be regulated by the state, can't be regulated by cities or localities. So Oregon is looking to become the most marijuana legal place in the world. I mean, our medical marijuana, first of all, we don't have any cap on our dispensaries. There can be as many dispensaries as can register. Now, they will be zoned. Can't be within 1,000 feet of a school, a playground, a church, an arcade, any place a child might want to be, right? They have to be zoned in industrial areas, can't be near residential, can't be within 1,000 feet of each other, to prevent like a mall, of pot shops. But those are pretty standard regulations. We find those in most of the other dispensary states as well. But with Oregon's dispensary, no cap on how many there can be per county or per city or anything like that. So we could see, in Portland alone, there's probably 80 already existing patient club pseudo dispensaries. And the registration fees are pretty low too, $1,000 to register, and no big, $30,000 non-refundable application fees or anything like that, like Massachusetts or something. This is going to be very affordable for people to get in. And I think my favorite part about it is that they're not trying to set up any sort of vertical integration or processor licensing. This is all, or producer licensing. It's all going to be just registration of the dispensaries themselves. Caregivers and growers and patients who are already currently growing under the medical marijuana law now will be able to sell their cannabis and their clones directly to the dispensaries. Which is, I mean, that's already what's happening now, but now it'll just be codified. And that is just wonderful, because one of the things I don't like about setting up this vertical integration, and by the way, vertical integration, for those you don't know what it means you have to do it all. Like, your business has to plant the seeds, grow the plants, harvest the plants, trim the plants, package the plants, sell the plants, right? You have to do the whole thing, right? And Colorado has got it set up that way. It's vertically integrated. So if you want to own a dispensary, you can't just own a dispensary. You have to grow the plants. You have to trim the plants, all that, right? So it makes it a game that only the biggest players can really get into, right? Because they have to cover so much of the market. And plus, with all the security requirements and seed to sale tracking, it's just, again, it's a big business game. In Washington State, they're doing it a little bit differently. It's not vertically integrated. In fact, it's anti-vertically integrated. You can't be the grower and the processor and the seller. You can be a grower, or you can be a processor, or you can be a seller, or you can be a grower who's also a processor, but not a seller, right? So they're trying to have some break in it, and they say that's to prevent some sort of monopolization that's going on. But it still requires people who want to be growers or processors to register and file these licenses and registrations and all that kind of stuff. So with the Oregon situation, only the seller has to be licensed and regulated and inspected and all of that. The growers and the processors, the trimmers, can all just be card holders with no extra registration other than getting their regular medical marijuana card. Now, this might frighten some people and say, well, a grower could come in with, moldy bud or, used pesticides or whatever. But that's where the regulations on the dispensaries come in. It's up to the dispensary to test and certify the product that they're selling. So bad growers aren't going to find much business trying to sell to these dispensaries. And that's just the medical marijuana side of things. They're talking about, on the recreational side, the most conservative measure being proposed right now would legalize a half pound of marijuana possession, cultivating 4 plants, taxing at $35 an ounce, with no limits on how many recreational pot stores there could be, other than the limits that are similar to the dispensaries. 1,000 feet from a school, yada, yada, yada. That's the conservative measure, folks. That's the one that the state likes. That's the one that the Oregonian editorial board likes. There's another measure on the ballot, the Cannabis Tax Act, that would legalize 1.5 pounds for adults over 21, would legalize cultivation of 24 plants for adults over 21, and all sorts of other considerations, legalizing hemp industry and so forth. What an amazing situation to be in, where come 2014, Oregon may be deciding between the liberal and the conservative pot measure, rather than whether or not it should be legalized at all. Also, keep in mind, Oregon still has no residency requirement on its medical marijuana. So, for example, and I will just use this as a hypothetical, not as any advice to anyone, but just a hypothetical, that if you were a patient in, say, Michigan, and you didn't like the 2.5 ounce limit at your dispensary, or 1 ounce limit, or whatever it is, you might be able to fly to Oregon, get yourself a medical marijuana card, shop at one of our fine dispensaries, fly back home. Because here in Oregon, our TSA at the Portland International Airport doesn't care if you're holding weed, so long as you have your medical marijuana card with it, and you can possess up to 1.5 pounds. Not that I would suggest anyone fly out of the airport with 1.5 pounds of marijuana and then land in Michigan, where that much marijuana would be illegal. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. That would be terrible. All right. Timing's a little off. I'm still a little sick. Thanks for sticking with me, folks. I had such a fever last night. I just could not do a show. Still a little feverish today, but it's getting better. We'll be right back.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Cannabis Outreach Collective is an alternative health and wellness option located in Gladstone, Oregon, that serves patients in the Portland area and beyond. We are a full-service alternative health and wellness collective accommodating patients with natural, organic, holistic, and homeopathic remedies, nutritional guidance, advice, education, and medical cannabis, fully in accordance with Oregon OMMP law. You can find out more about Cannabis Outreach Collective on Facebook at COC503 or by emailing cannabisoutreachcollective503@gmail.com or by telephone at 503-853-1319. Check out our menu on Weed Maps and visit Cannabis Outreach Collective today.
Let him bring in the beat.
Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, The Russ Belville Show, Ganja John, and Cascadia Concentrates, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Adam's meticulous designs are individually crafted and screened in vibrant, high-definition color. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
Let him bring in the beat.
420radio.org presents Cannabis Network Radio featuring David Kowalski from Tampa, Florida, every Wednesday at noon Pacific, with replays 5 a.m. and 11 p.m. on Thursdays and Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, right here on 420radio.org.
Welcome back, every 23 after the hour, and in this segment, we're going to bring back a topic that we talk about a lot here on Toker Talk Radio, and that is these BHO guys. Oh, my God. Another story. This one's coming from my Fox LA, Los Angeles local news. Garage explosion may have been pot lab. A 31-year-old man hospitalized following an explosion in a Dana Point garage is suspected of accidentally sparking the blast in a pot-extracting lab, a sheriff's lieutenant said today. Investigators found a dead dog, marijuana, and butane in the garage following the explosion, Orange County Sheriff's Lieutenant Jeff Halleck said. The blast in the garage of the 26800 block of Vista Del Mar occurred about noon and started a fire that spread to some trees, a studio apartment, a condominium complex, and an apartment complex. Orange County bomb squads have investigated at least a half dozen butane explosions related to THC extraction over the past 18 months. That's about once every 3 months, right? The injured man suffered serious burns to his face, chest, arms, and legs, Halleck said. He has not been arrested so far, the lieutenant added. Now, again, this is just another story of some idiot trying to blast BHO, and we all know the reason he's doing it is because there's massive profit in it right now, and the fact that he's an idiot that doesn't realize that butane is a heavier-than-air gas. It's extremely volatile and will explode at the slightest spark. But that's not why I bring this story up. I always like to look at these stories from the framing perspective. You know me, I'm all into all this neurolinguistics and framing. And it was interesting to me the choice of the words pot lab. What's the other thing that you think of when we say lab in a drug story? Meth lab. We don't often hear coke lab. We don't hear heroin lab. Those don't really exist. They do, but they never get phrased that way, do they? But meth lab, that's something we've all heard about quite a bit. And this is not accidental. This is Fox, obviously, promoting the story. And they know that the word lab conjures up a frame that gives people an image of Bunsen burners and beakers and tubes and chemicals and acids and all sorts of chemistry going on that could be explosive or could be corrosive or poisonous or, all the things that you would associate with meth labs, right? But in actuality, what we were talking about blasting BHO, is as far from a lab as my tap water is from a Coca-Cola plant. Yes, they are both producing liquid, but beyond that, the similarities end, okay? When we're talking about blasting BHO, for you folks that don't know what the process is, here's how tough it is. If you go to a hemp fest or if you go to a head shop, especially on the West Coast, I don't know what it's like out on the East Coast and Midwest, probably not as easy to get these things. But out here on the West Coast, you can go to a head shop and you'll see these big, long tubes, about 15 to 20 inches long, about maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches in diameter, thick glass. And it's got a big opening on one side. And it's usually this long glass tube, and then at the very end of it, it may taper down or end in a kind of a small hole. And if you didn't know a thing about BHO, you might think this is the worst pot pipe ever devised. But what is done is that guys take this tube and they stuff it full, usually of trim, right? Usually the point is to try to make hash out of your trim or your popcorn buds. You get the good buds and you put those out on the shelf, right? And then with all the trim and everything else, you pack this into this tube. Because even though it's leaves and stems and popcorn buds, little buds, they still have plenty of THC. You pack this tube just completely full, and then on the big end of the can, or big end of the tube, you get a can of butane, and you spray the butane through this tube. Now, the butane strips away the THC, the CBD, the essential oils, some of the terpenes and flavonoids and so on. And what drips out of that little hole on the bottom is a mix of butane and all these cannabis oils. And you collect them in a pie tin or a plate or something, And once this is all dripped through, once you've forced all the butane through and you've got this big pie plate full of, butane and cannabis, the butane evaporates. And once the butane evaporates, you're left with this oil or shatter or wax or whatever it might be, but you're left with the pure cannabis oil. Of course, it's the butane evaporating away that then pools on the ground, and when it finds an ignition source, explodes. But that's not a lab. There's no chemicals being mixed here. There's no application of open flame in order to change a chemical or anything like that. We are just talking about forcing through butane into a tube full of marijuana and stripping away the essential oils. So it is more akin to getting peppermint oil off of peppermint than it is to any sort of lab or meth-making operation like that. So this is the framing that they're putting behind this. They want to use the word lab to evoke, to conjure up the idea of an exploding meth lab, of dangerous chemicals, of poisonous gases. Now, this is not to try to reduce the danger of these hash-making operations. Obviously, they're causing explosions, blowing the windows out of homes, blowing the roofs off of garages, causing fires. And I know that none of us want to live next door to somebody that might be causing fires and explosions. But the whole motivation behind all of this has to do with the insane amount of profit that can be made by manufacturing this relatively simple to make drug. And given that prohibition leads people to want to make a more potent drug, we can blame prohibition for the popularity of the emergence of hash oil lately. You know, if you've got a limited place to be able to smuggle something, are you going to smuggle a big, bulky bag of smelly weed? Or would you rather take a small oil slick container of a few grams of oil that's not as smelly, that's, some people, when they see it, they wouldn't even know that it's cannabis. They might think it's gum or something for all they know. That's what is driving a lot of this BHO. And what's frustrating is that we have legalization starting to take place in this country, and we've got these laws that are starting to evolve on this. But as they legalize, a lot of these officials are trying to set tax rates and set regulatory structures in such a way as to maintain as high a price on cannabis as possible, which is exactly the opposite of what they should be trying to do. As long as the price remains high, the profit motive for smuggling more potent and more concealable items remains. So this is what we need to do. It's time for us to start to lobby now that we've got our majority, that we've got 58% in this country that are supporting our legalization efforts. It's time for them to start to understand the market behind this and how the market drives a lot of these harms that they are so afraid of. And that through legalization, our goals shouldn't be trying to keep marijuana as expensive as possible. Our goals should be to try to reduce the price of it as low as possible. And it seems counterintuitive to a lot of these folks. They can't really just get their mind around that idea that it should be as cheap as possible. But think about this with respect to beer, right? If you think about beer, anybody who wants to get a beer can get a beer. And while there are more expensive craft beers and specialty beers out there, if you want a PBR, you can buy one for a couple bucks, maybe $1 on draft. And there are more concentrated versions. More concentrated versions of alcohol in the form of liquor and, hard alcohol. But we don't see people building stills in the woods to manufacture moonshine. At least not to the extent we used to, right? I mean, there's always been a moonshine trade. There's always been people who do it. They're still doing it out in Appalachia. But as a major black market commodity, there's just no big profit in being a bootlegger anymore. So, yes, we have Everclear in some states. We have Bacardi 151. We have 100 proof liquors. We have the more concentrated varieties. And these more concentrated varieties are manufactured in industrial locales with safety inspections and regulations. And while liquor is more expensive, it's not that much more expensive. And even though we've sin-taxed it to a level far above what other items are taxed at, it's not so sin-taxed that people can't afford it. So as we move forward, as we take this legalization fight to the rest of the country, we need to start expressing the economics of it and having these people understand that keeping the price high is one of the major failings of prohibition. And that should be something we don't want to emulate with legalization. Now, I can just hear people in Washington and Colorado shrieking at this, saying, my God, well, our legalization has 25% taxes or our whatever. And I feel your pain. And again, this is what Ethan Nadelman mentioned, is that the first couple of states are going to have to suffer through some of these growing pains. And that's what I'm trying to get us to all learn from. We shall see what the effect of this taxation is in Washington and Colorado over the next few years. We'll see if those taxes are too high. And as far as the Proposition AA in Colorado, I wrote a tweet today that addressed this fact. I don't know why they're complaining about the pot taxes in Colorado when they have the right to grow their own. Now, in Washington, they got a complaint because you're not allowed to grow your own in Washington, so you have to break the law to avoid the taxes. But in Colorado, you don't like the taxes, grow your own. That was the whole point in having a grow your own. This is something Keith Straub has said since the beginning. We have to maintain the right to grow your own as a check on overtaxation and monopolization by governments and corporations. I think Colorado is going to prove that out. I think you'll see those taxes come down after a few years. Stick around. When we come back, we're going to talk about race and the drug war.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, home of the famous lighter leash. Herb Age Designs, get your Herb Age t-shirts and hoodies and show your pride. Herb Age Designs, we've got frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com and follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter. We'll see you at this year's Hemp Fest. Crank it up.
Saludos desde la revista High Times. Te invitamos a venir a Ámsterdam desde el 24 al 28 de noviembre al 26 aniversario de nuestro Cannabis Cup, donde demostraremos las muchas variedades de marihuana y hachís en los coffee shops. También tendremos una exposición de productos, seminarios de sembradíos, conciertos en las noches y una ceremonia de premios donde honramos la mejor marihuana del mundo. ¡Vámonos!
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Welcome back, everybody. It's just about 38 after the hour. I'm talking to you live from Nampa, Idaho, the place of my birth. Nampa High School, class of 1985. Been a while since I've been out to see my parents and wasn't going to have the opportunity to get out for Thanksgiving, so I came out here just a little bit early. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the week out here. We'll have remote shows on tomorrow, and in fact, on tomorrow's remote show, we will have Stephanie Joins, who was our guest today, but we were having difficulty getting in touch with her. So I just got an email back from her. She was in the car with New Jersey weed man Ed Fortune when I was trying to call, too. So that would have been a fun conversation. But she's down to be on the show tomorrow, so we will put her in the interview slot for tomorrow and talk to her about Moms for Marijuana in New Jersey and a little bit about Child Protective Services and NYPD Stop and Frisk. Speaking of Child Protective Services, next week, join us for a special set of shows. We'll be off on Monday for Veterans Day, but starting on Tuesday, we're doing a 4-day-long special block of shows dedicated to Child Protective Services and the drug war. We have got a lineup of great guests, including Charmy Goulson, Sarah Frank, Lindsay Reinhart, Sarah Arnold, Sarah Frank, and many more. Diane Goldstein from LEAP will be on. We'll be talking about the effect of Child Protective Services on patients, parents who are medical marijuana patients getting their kids taken away, as well as recreational users who face difficulty with Child Protective Services over their marijuana use. Make sure you tune in next week and tell your friends on Facebook and Twitter to tune in as well. It'll be a special set of shows. All right, for this segment, I wanted to talk about an email that I received. There was an article that Dr. Carl Hart put out last week, I believe it was. Maybe it was the week before. But he was talking about the marijuana reform movement's need to better understand racial issues with respect to the drug war. And basically, he was saying that he was on the radio with a marijuana reformer who kind of dismissed the racial aspect of marijuana policing. And, basically said that it's an aspect of the drug war, but it's, just one of many parts of the drug war. And frankly, some other parts of the drug war poll better, which is kind of a way of saying white folks won't vote for legalization if they just think it's a black problem. Just to put not too fine a point on it. And this angered Dr. Hart, who, by the way, is African American and one of the few African Americans not only in marijuana reform, but in clinical research. He's at Columbia University and one of the few researchers who's actually allowed to work with marijuana and other drugs in this country. And so he was very disturbed about this and wanted to point out that racism and the racial nature of marijuana arrests and drug arrests is the issue. That it's the whole reason we have a drug war equates to racism, and that the marijuana movement really needs to get on board with this. And as I talked about this last week, I kind of equivocated on it. I was kind of wishy-washy. It's like, well, yes, racism is the foundation of the drug war, and it's the reason for continuing the drug war, and it has the effect of being the new Jim Crow. But everybody I know who's had a problem with law enforcement related to marijuana is white. I know that's just anecdotal, but while there is racism in the drug war, it goes beyond racism, and I think now is more of a culturism or a classism that still disproportionately is going to ensnare black and Latino people. But I think it's gone beyond just race. And so that I was kind of equivocating. I was kind of, pointing out that, maybe Mason Tvert has a point in that if we paint this as just a race issue, we might lose white support. Well, this prompted an email from one of our readers, Wayne Reese, who has written a couple things that I've posted up on my blog. He's very astute, very good writer on these issues. And he agrees with Dr. Carl Hart, and he says racism is the drug war. And I will eventually post this up on my radicalruss.com page, his full essay once he gets it all written up. But in his email to me, I think I really applaud him for emailing and calling me out on this, because I was equivocating. And when I really think about it, and after reading Wayne's piece on this, I'm more in Dr. Carl Hart's camp. Now, as I talked about this, and I want to just read one portion of Wayne's criticism of me. And again, folks, I love criticism. I'm not so fond of trolls and ad hominem and name calling, but if you disagree with me and can make a cogent point, please do. Please disagree with me. I learn more from the people that disagree with me than the people that agree with me, by far. And often, maybe not often, but occasionally, someone with a really good point of view can get me to change mine. The one example comes to mind right off the top of my head is hate crime laws. Used to be against them, now I'm for them. That's a whole nother rant. But anyway, here, let me just read this one paragraph from Wayne. He says, I also found your comment disturbing that the equal rights movement owes its success to white folks. That would be equivalent to saying that legalization owes its success to people who don't give a crap about freedom. Okay, I just want to address that part because I don't know that I said it that way. But what I did say is that the civil rights movement and all movements for social justice for minorities cannot succeed without some help from the majority. The civil rights movement, while we cannot forget the importance of, Dr. Martin Luther King and all the marchers and all the people that were working with him, all the African Americans that were fighting for civil rights, it wouldn't have happened if Lyndon B. Johnson hadn't signed it. And there were a lot of white folks that were involved helping this out too. I mean, you can look all the way back to, pre-Civil War days when, white folks were setting up the routes to help escaped slaves get to Canada and such. So, I mean, I guess that's what I was trying to get at with that expression, is that this movement for marijuana legalization has to have some appeal to people who don't smoke marijuana, just as the civil rights movement had to have an appeal that it was for all people and not just black people, even though at the time black people was who it was for, really. But until the argument can be made that this is a fight that is about human rights, not particular rights for a particular group, but a fight for all of our rights, I think that's where I'm trying to go with this. And that's what I see in the civil rights struggle, or in the gay rights struggle, is that while it is something that directly affects black folks or gay folks, the principle behind fighting for all of it is a principle of freedom for all of us. And maybe that's what Wayne is getting at too, is that this racism in the drug war needs to be shown to people for what it is, that it's rank racism, but that we also need to make sure that people understand it's about all of us. I don't know for certain the race of the two gentlemen in New Mexico who were just sodomized by authorities down there, but the names David Eckert and Timothy Young lead me to think they're probably white. So there is a racism in the drug war, and the racism is systemic in the drug war and a reflection of some of the systemic racism in our American society, for that matter. But the drug war, while it is racism, has expanded to become more than that. And that's really what I want to make sure that we all understand. We can't dismiss it. We cannot dismiss that the genesis and the impetus of the drug war is racist. But to solely look at it as racism, I think does a disservice to how broad it understates. Let's put it that way. It understates how big the drug war is. To me, the drug war is bigger than racism. That's a bold statement, I know, but to me, the drug war is bigger than racism. Like I said earlier, it's a classism, it's a cultureism, it's a culture war. It's a means to a police state. It's a means to a police state. And if those New Mexico stories don't illustrate that for you, then I don't know how bad things have to get before you would recognize the police state that we're falling into. It's going to be interesting as we continue to legalize to see how the police state responds when they don't have pot smokers to go after. Will they go after the hard criminals? Part of what we've heard about why the cops like, illegal marijuana so much is because you bust a pot smoker, they're polite, they're cooperative, they don't puke in the back of the squad car, they don't smell, they don't got diseases for the most part, right? They're generally decent people to arrest, if you have to pick anyone to arrest, right? So when we take those away from the cops, they don't have all those make-work arrests and all that busy time they have filling out paperwork on pot arrests. What are they going to do with all that time? What are they going to do with all those military toys? Now, we often like to frame it in the marijuana movement as now they can put their resources toward violent crime, but will they? Will a bunch of cops who've grown fat and complacent over busting potheads suddenly want to go chase down murderers and rapists who might fight back? I sure hope so. I hope that's the way it goes. But we'll see. We'll just see how this continuing wave of legalization is going to affect things. And now that we've had Maine, Portland, Maine, vote on legalization at a 2-1 margin, it's difficult to try to imagine how this wave of legalization doesn't continue and march its way down the East Coast just like it's marching across the West. It's a good time to be a marijuana reformer, let me tell you. And it's a little odd, too. Not used to being in the majority. Not used to realizing that my point of view on marijuana is something that a majority of the people agree with. That if I walked into a room in Portland, Maine with 30 people, 20 of them would agree with me. We'll be back for our final segment. Stick around. It's Toker Talk Radio.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
I'm Sub Cool from Team Green Avenger. At TGAgenetics.com, we are working on the leading edge of medical strains. Our strains are rigorously tested for THC, CBD, THCV, and other critical cannabinoids. Know your grow. Check out our genetic diversity at TGAgenetics.com, the home of Jelly Bean, Jack the Ripper, Vortex, and other award-winning cannabis strains.
Big Daddy thinks.
Oh yeah, this is Big Daddy, and I'll be your freakazoid every Thursday night, right here at the Funky Roller Ring. Funky Roller Ring. 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, only on RadicalRuss.com.
Ever wonder how often to change your bong water? The most effective method for baking pot brownies? The best destinations for a ganja getaway? How to hide herb in your car? Whether to grow your own? How precisely to legalize it? Or how something as wonderful as marijuana ever got to be illegal in the first place? Finally, you can find all these answers and much more in the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook, featuring 420 things to do when you're stoned. Since 1974, High Times Magazine has covered marijuana in all its aspects and wonders, from cultivation to legalization to the herb's enduring and exalted place in popular culture. Packed with inside information, the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook rolls all of this collected wisdom together into a single indispensable ganja guide, including an entertaining look at marijuana's history, profiles of herb-friendly travel destinations and festivals, favorite potluck recipes from the High Times staff, smoking skills, advocacy and activism, essential marijuana movies and songs, profiles of famous cannabis strains, comprehensive growing information, celebrity endorsements, and much more. This is truly, finally, the ultimate guide to green living.
All right, welcome back, everybody. 52 after the hour here from Nampa, Idaho. And I just want to let you know, coming up next here on 420 Radio at 5 p.m. Pacific hour, it's Free Weed! Free Weed! From Danny Danko. That's right, Danny Danko, High Times Senior Cultivation Editor, brings you the latest grow tips and preview of the Cannabis Cup coming up later this month in Amsterdam. It's the 26th annual, so check that out. Danny Danko's Free Weed, right here on 420 Radio, or just go to highttimes.com/freeweed. Also, coming up later tonight, 8 p.m. Pacific, after the replays of our show at 6 and 7, at 8 o'clock Pacific, we've got Red Eyes Reggae Flashback with Brian the Red, one of my favorite experts on reggae music. He'll be bringing you the deep tracks and roots rhythms from the best of reggae. So check that out tonight, 8 p.m. Pacific, live on 420radio.org. All right, we've got a couple of other updates here to let you know about in the election last night. And this is a couple I did not realize. Actually, I did know one, and that is the Miami Beach mayor's race. You may remember that we had interviewed Steve Burke from his Miami Beach penthouse. Steve Burke was the guy behind the parody songs Should Be Legalized and Pot Shop. We've played him here on the show quite a few times. Anyway, he lost his bid for mayor of Miami Beach, but apparently his running for mayor may have helped to cause a runoff for the winner of the race. The Miami Beach mayoral election reported that businessman Philip Levine won with 50 0.48% of the vote. But according to the law, any vote that's 50.5% or lower has to go to a recount. So there's going to be an automatic recount in this Miami Beach mayoral race. Now, it won't help our friend Steve Burkett. He apparently did not even place in the top 3 as far as the mayors here. Levine won, followed by a city councilman named Michael Gongora, a commissioner, Michael Gongora, finished second. So this would be either a recount that would show that Levine actually won, or if the recount keeps Levine below 50.5%, then they might have to have a runoff election between Levine and his opponent, Gongora. So that's the update in Miami Beach. But better news on the marijuana front from Miami Beach. We told you about the legalization votes in the cities of Portland, Maine, Ferndale, Lansing, and Jackson, Michigan. I had failed to realize that there was a vote in Miami Beach. In Miami Beach, they voted on the decriminalization of marijuana for medical use. Miami Beach voters were the first in Florida to ever have such a vote at the city level on medical marijuana, and it won with just about that same 2-to-1 margin all the other 4 cities won with for legalization. In Miami Beach, it came out with 64 to 36% support for medical marijuana. 64% support in Miami Beach, Florida for medical marijuana. Now, this is just a straw poll, so it's not like the municipal ordinances that they passed in those other 4 cities that actually did something. All this did was just ask people what they thought. You think it ought to be legal? And they all said, well, yeah. But it doesn't change a damn thing. Still, that is great. And remember Phil Levine that we were talking about? The guy who's going into the recount for mayor? Medical marijuana got 1,000 more votes than this guy did. It's time for these politicians to start realizing that support for medical marijuana or marijuana legalization isn't a millstone around their neck. It's a jetpack on their back, man. It's going to rise them in the polls now. More people are going to support a candidate who agrees with a 2-to-1 majority than oppose a candidate who agrees with a 2-to-1 majority. And I am excited for the elections coming up in 2014 to see how various state representatives and U.S. House races and senatorial races change as politicians start to realize marijuana can get them votes. Or at least that marijuana is not going to cost them votes. It's going to be remarkable. We're going to see politicians that are going to be fighting each other to show which one of them is more pro-marijuana. And if you don't think that can happen, just look back to 2012. In 2012 in Washington State, the sheriff's race for King County came down to 2 guys running for sheriff trying to show which one of them was more supportive of I-502. Cops fighting over which one of them wanted legalization more. If you don't like the future, you're not going to like marijuana. I'm sorry, I said that backward. If you don't like marijuana, you're not going to like the future. Oh, God, I'm sick. Too many cold runs, folks. I'm trying. Thanks for hanging with me on this 75% effort here. For Russ Belmo, so it's Toker talking to you. We're live from Nampa, Idaho tomorrow. Hopefully I'll feel a little bit better. Thanks for joining us. Yankee Yank goes next. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you